You're not born a winner. You're not born a loser. You're born a chooser. The ultimate decision is yours. Everything you needed to succeed was handed to you, but the life you lived depended entirely on the choice you make. Some blame luck, some blame fate. But the truth? The choices you make, not destiny, carve the path of your life. And these two brothers prove just how much a choice can change everything. In Cleveland, Ohio, on a quiet street lined with maple trees and brick houses that had stood for decades, two brothers grew up under the same roof. Ethan and Ryan Carter. Their childhood was unremarkable on the surface. They shared bedrooms, fought over video games, and argued over who would walk the dog. But beneath the ordinary life, both boys were extraordinary in ways no one could see yet. Their father, a high school chemistry teacher, often marveled at how both could solve complex equations before he even finished explaining them. Their mother, a nurse, saw their empathy and curiosity in small ways. Ethan, carefully bandaging scraped knees of neighborhood kids. Ryan dissecting bugs and insects just to see how they worked. One winter evening, when Ethan was 15 and Ryan 16, the brothers transformed the basement into a laboratory. They had saved up for a proper chemistry set, and the tiny furnace glowed beneath the makeshift fume hood. They were attempting a harmless experiment, but a small miscalculation sent smoke curling up the stairs. The fire alarm screamed, and their mother burst in, coughing, while the boys froze, half terrified, half exhilarated. The fire was small, quickly extinguished, but the incident lingered in their minds. That night, Ryan laughed. "Man, imagine if we could make something bigger, something no one else has." Ethan frowned. "Or we could make something that helps people, not burns the house down." That single conversation planted the seeds of what their lives would become. The same curiosity, the same intelligence diverging along different moral paths. In high school, both excelled academically. They were the top of their class, members of the science club, and stars on the debate team. They competed fiercely but always pushed each other to be better. Teachers often said, "The Carter boys will go far." At a regional science fair, both submitted projects. Ethan's on regenerative medicine and Ryan's on experimental chemical reactions. Ethan's project earned him a scholarship to Johns Hopkins, and Ryan's, while controversial for its bold approach, earned attention from private investors who quietly admired his risk-taking spirit. The same brilliance, the same drive, but glimpses of the different roads they would take were beginning to show. They enrolled at Case Western Reserve University together, pursuing degrees in biochemistry. Dorm life, lectures, and lab sessions were shared, but their choices increasingly diverged. Ethan stayed disciplined, attending early labs, volunteering at local clinics, and tutoring younger students. Ryan was equally brilliant, but restless. While Ethan meticulously wrote his lab reports, Ryan experimented with chemicals he was not supposed to touch. One evening, he sold a small batch of a stimulant he had synthesized to fraternity members. It wasn't dangerous, not yet, but it gave him a thrill, a sense of control, a taste of power that Ethan never craved. "It's just chemistry," Ryan shrugged when Ethan confronted him. "I'm not hurting anyone seriously." Ethan shook his head, worried, but both graduated with honors. After college, the two brothers walked into the world with the same credentials, the same opportunities, and the same potential. Ethan chose the long, grueling path of medical school at Johns Hopkins. He dedicated years to understanding the human body, learning not just theory, but how to heal, how to comfort, how to save lives. Ryan, however, saw the world differently. Instead of residency, he took a deal from a private investor interested in developing novel compounds. He wasn't a criminal in the classic sense. He had legal patents and businesses, but his focus was on profit and influence, creating drugs that altered minds and pushed boundaries. Where Ethan sought to save lives, Ryan sought to command them. During Ethan's residency, he faced a defining moment. A young boy arrived at the ER with severe burns. Despite his best efforts, the child's condition worsened, and Ethan felt crushing guilt. He stayed at the hospital all night, refusing to go home, replaying every decision in his mind. By morning, he had learned not just how to perform procedures, but how to carry the weight of responsibility. The incident solidified his path. His choice to heal was no longer abstract. It was personal. It was moral. It was a calling. Meanwhile, Ryan faced his own crucible. One of his experimental compounds caused an unexpected reaction in a user. No fatalities, but enough to trigger a police investigation. He barely escaped scrutiny, hiding evidence and moving labs overnight. The thrill of danger became addictive. He had the same intelligence, the same problem-solving skills as Ethan, but he applied them to avoid consequences rather than prevent harm. Each close call honed his skill, but it also deepened his isolation. Ryan lived a life of adrenaline, constantly calculating risks, constantly aware that one mistake could undo him. Years later, their worlds reflected their choices. Ethan was now a lead researcher at Mayo Clinic, credited with developing a groundbreaking non-addictive pain medication. Patients traveled across the country to see him, their gratitude evident in tears and smiles. His days were long, his nights often interrupted by calls from the ER, but his heart was full. When reporters came to interview him, he spoke humbly about the team and the science, always redirecting praise to the patients whose courage inspired him. His parents, visiting from Cleveland, sat in the front row of an awards ceremony, beaming as Ethan accepted a National Innovation Award. Ryan's life had become a complex web. His compounds were popular, powerful, and controversial. Money flowed in, but so did danger. He moved constantly between Detroit and Chicago, between labs and safe houses, always aware that someone could betray him at any moment. His influence was real, but his existence was invisible to the world that celebrated his brother. Where Ethan's name appeared in journals and magazines, Ryan's was whispered in shadows. He was respected by some, feared by others, but never celebrated. Each new invention brought profit, but also paranoia. Every success carried the risk of exposure. Despite their separation, life kept creating mirrors. On Thanksgiving, the brothers returned home. The dinner table was tense. Ethan's awards and letters of recognition were proudly displayed. Ryan, leaning against the kitchen counter, was quiet, a faint smirk on his face. "So you're saving lives now?" he asked casually. Ethan nodded. "And you?" Ryan's eyes flickered. "Making life more interesting." Their father sighed, the same mixture of pride and worry that had followed them since childhood. The conversation ended with silence, but each brother knew that the other was living in a world he could never fully understand. The final twist of fate came unexpectedly. A young man overdosed on one of Ryan's new compounds and was rushed to Northwestern Memorial Hospital. Ethan was on call that night. The boy was barely breathing, his life hanging by a thread. Ethan and his team worked tirelessly, applying every skill, every lesson, every ounce of care. By dawn, the patient stabilized. Ethan sat back in the quiet of the empty ER, exhausted but relieved. Meanwhile, Ryan heard a rumor of a young man in Chicago who had nearly died from one of his experiments, only to hear that he had been saved in the hospital. A cold realization washed over him. The same hands that could create life-destroying compounds could also save lives. Ethan's hands were steady, skilled, and unafraid. Ryan's were restless, hiding in shadows. Years passed. They continued on their parallel paths, living as contrasts of the same potential. Ethan's name became synonymous with honor, healing, and respect. Ryan remained elusive, brilliant but hidden, powerful yet isolated. The world saw one brother as a hero, the other only glimpsed in whispers. And yet, the truth remained. Both had started with the same mind, the same upbringing, the same opportunities. The only difference was choice. Ethan often thought about the basement fire, the sleepless nights in college, the crossroads after graduation. Ryan did too, in his own way, calculating, moving, surviving. Both lived in the consequences of their decisions, shaped by the same intelligence, divided by the moral paths they chose. And that was all it took. One chose to heal, the other chose to experiment with shadows. Two brothers, the same beginning, two very different worlds. You are not born a winner. You are not born a loser. You are born a chooser. And every choice writes the story of your life.